Hello and welcome back to Well Played. I'm Blake Lou Merwin.
And I'm Amanda Duberman. Blake, she's back. Our girl's back. Back from vacation. Before I get an update on your trip, do you want to tell the audience, what do we have planned for today's show?
Yes, we're going to recap some of the biggest stories from NFL Week 2. We have a very special guest, probably the best fantasy football expert in the game, Matthew Berry, to give us some insider tips and tricks on how to win your league. I know that I need them because as I was on vacation, I did not reset my lineup last week, and literally I think 4 of my players. But I still won.
We got lightly admonished by our league commissioner.
Yes,
Keep it competitive, guys. Matthew Berry will help us out.
Yes, exactly. That's coming up later. And also we have a new YouTube channel, as I'm sure you might have heard. Search Well Played on YouTube by the Skim right now to see our gorgeous little faces.
And please make it worth our while to put on a full beat on a Tuesday morning.
Full beat. I got my slick back
before
going.
Getting to Times Square. Yeah, you look great.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you so much.
All right, Blake. As we discussed, you are freshly back from France, home of the 2024 Olympics. Can you please report back on what the locals think of one specific story we discussed a few weeks ago that you promised to deliver us some dispatches on? Did you have a chance to talk to locals about the idea of perma rings, permanent Olympic rings on the Eiffel Tower? We had thoughts on this.
We did.
Did Parisians have thoughts on this?
Okay, so here's the limits of my study, which was that I was mostly not in Paris, and I was mostly with people over the age of 70 years old.
Okay, that's important to note. Those are important conditions.
Yes, they are. And I really asked the question. I remember to ask the question with specifically 4 adults of the age of 70 to 71. I was basically with my French grandparents, if you will, in the south of France. And the consensus of them, at least, was no rings.
Wow.
And, as old people, and specifically old French people like to do, the conversation turned extremely philosophical very fast.
That's so funny.
So I kind of started to tune out. But basically the point is that they said no rings. If we're going to put up rings, we have to put up rings in every single city where the Olympics are happening, period, is what they said.
It has to be the norm. Don't force. We do not want to set that precedent. No. Take them down. We will be watching that closely.
We will. But that's enough about what I've been up to. Amanda, what did I miss while I was out of the country? Can you please fill me in?
You missed quite an eventful week and change in sports. As for me, I feel like lately I have been relating to some of the athletes we've been talking about in basketball. We haven't touched too much on baseball, but they're entering their postseason, and much like them, because they are the strenuous athletic activity that I am participating in is my 3rd trimester. Like athletes in their postseason, I'm a little beat up. I'm pretty tired. I want it to be over. So that's where I'm at. I'm getting ready for the finals. I'm a little intimidated, but I'm kind of like, let's just go. Let's get this done with. The goal is in sight. I am in my pregnancy.
Can I also just say that you do not come across as intimidated, which brings me a lot of comfort. I don't know. But I know that you're silently freaking out.
Well, I was telling you before we started, I did take my 4-hour intensive birth class over the weekend, and then it got
4 hours?
Yeah, I suppose you could do like 1 hour every 4 weeks. We were like, let's just do this. Let's just like get it done. Let's do a clinic and how to get a baby out of me. And since then, I've been struggling. But I've been relating to some of these athletes that we're talking about. By the end of the season, like I said, you're beat up, you're in pain, yet it's the hardest, most important part. But we'll get there. We'll all get there. Me and Stewie, we're on the same page. We will get there. All right. Like I said, we've got a ton of sports headlines to dive into. So let's start with a roundup of our favorite stories dominating your feeds this week. It is our first segment, Playing the Field.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the only way I can start this segment because this first story is...
Let's get into how babies are made.
Literally, though, guys, hold on to your seats because this is kind of insane. We're going to get started with a former athlete who sounds like he was maybe playing the field a little too hard this past week. Shannon Sharpe, the NFL Hall of Fame tight end and host of ESPN's First Take, accidentally went... I wish that you could guess. Like, I know that you know this story, but I wish that I could have set this up for you to guess on where he went live having sex, basically, to put it bluntly.
In an intimate moment, for sure.
In an intimate moment to make it, a little more clean for our audience.
Maybe that's just the sound he makes when he's smooching. Who knows?
You're right. I shouldn't be making these assumptions. Yeah. He had an intimate moment on Instagram Live, y'all, with his millions of followers catching what sounded like, I said, a sex tape. But it didn't just sound like it. It turns out his fans, they were hearing the real thing.
Yeah, hearing. It seemed like the phone had been placed on like a wooden surface or a bed, but the audio was pretty unmistakable.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us more about what
Sharpe,
Shannon told us after?
Shannon Sharpe, Mr. Sharpe, he initially claimed that he was hacked. He initially just denied it, which, I that's really intense. I feel like I would also
gut
be
reaction?
like, what? No, yeah, that wasn't me. So he tweeted, "Beware, my Instagram was hacked this morning. My team and I are working vigorously to figure this out." Somebody was working vigorously. It wasn't long before Shannon Sharpe just came clean. He gave an explanation of how it happened on his podcast. He said, like many 56-year-old men, like many uncles, I threw my phone on the bed, engaged in an activity. I did not know IG Live. I never turned IG Live on. So I don't know.
Who is she?
I don't know how it works. All of a sudden, my other phone started going off. Presumably with people frantically. These are really good friends and agents that immediately saw this. He said, my heart sank. I called my agent. I called the agency. I called ESPN. And just imagine having to call work right after that happens and to just tell them the truth. My phone wasn't hacked. It wasn't a prank. It was me being a healthy, active male.
I'm glad he's being healthy and active, but
Yeah.
I understand also I wouldn't have wanted to click onto that Instagram live. You just never
very
know.
brief. It was like 20 seconds or something.
Oh,
but
so you...
I looked on TikTok for the full audio and I kept getting interrupted by like memes, but maybe that's TikTok sweeping, trying to get it down.
I was like, please don't watch this. Yeah, but he also continued by saying, obviously, I'm embarrassed. Someone that is extremely, extremely private, and to have one of your most intimate details, the audio, heard for the entire world to hear, I'm embarrassed for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
Amanda, what do you think? Do you think this is actually going to hurt his career? Or
No, not at all. Either it seems like he was actually selling T-shirts for a period, and then I think they maybe got taken down. Maybe his team was like, "This is too far." No, I mean, not to be this person who always has this reaction, but I'm happy to play this role on the podcast.
Let's hear it.
This will not hurt his career because he's a man.
Yeah,
and that's not his fault. Like, I don't think it should hurt his career. I'm not saying like this would absolutely hurt a woman's career. As a result, it should hurt Shannon Sharpe's career. Like he said, like it was a mistake. He wasn't doing anything wrong as far as we know. It was a consensual encounter. We couldn't see what was going on. So it's not like you scarred children on Instagram.
Thank God. Literally, thank God.
Oh my gosh. But you can just imagine if this was a woman in the same position, this would come to define how people knew her and related to her, which again isn't Mr. Sharpe's problem. One thing that felt a little missing from his remarks is I wanted to maybe see an apology to the woman he was with, but I suspect maybe he wants to protect her privacy.
Yeah.
So again, I think this will blow over for him, which I think is excellent. I think it should. I don't think we should sex shame. It was clearly a mistake. I just do think it's worth sort of flagging that if this were a woman in a similar position, she would be mocked endlessly.
Oh, God.
She would never be able to escape this. She wouldn't be taken as seriously. I don't think in these times she would lose her job because I think people know better and know the double standards. But maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, there would have been some claims about like this woman is, not appropriate for people to be watching on TV. But yeah, very perfect playing the field story. Very funny. I mean, but you know what? Good for Shannon.
Yeah. I know his co-host on ESPN's First Take was sort of having his back. I also did see the podcast clip that he recorded basically right after it happened. And yeah, I know. He was like in crisis management mode right away, which I was like, okay, respect. Yeah. I'm glad he kind of just owned up to it. But it was interesting to see like his co-host was like, man, you're my coworker. Like, I can't believe this is happening. I feel like you owe me some, not like you owe me some sort of apology, but then he also proceeded to kind of like poke fun at the situation, which was interesting to just see play out. I'm not saying you should watch or try and find this audio, but definitely check out that podcast clip because it was just interesting to see how these men decided to do it.
Maybe even I was talking specifically about how even if this had been a woman, it would have been detrimental, but maybe society has evolved a little bit more. I think even like this is a better outcome than had this happened to him 10, 15 years ago. People are just a little less prudish overall. I mean, it's not a big deal. This happens. Again, had there been visuals, we probably would have been having a different conversation.
I completely agree.
But I think this will be absolutely fine for Mr. Sharpe. I do think it was the right call to take the T-shirts off his website.
The least he could do.
Yeah. Okay, Blake, next up in Playing the Field, last week with Claudia, it does seem like we are frequently discussing how Taylor Swift's political inclinations are influencing the sports world. Last week, we talked about how she had come under some heat for her association with Brittany Mahomes, who has expressed online support for President Trump, the Republican candidate for president. As I think Claudia and I predicted, Tree Payne, that definitely made sure she hastened the Kamala Harris endorsement, which Taylor Swift offered after the debate last week. So she posted, everybody saw it. Everyone on the planet saw it. She posted a picture of her and her cat coming out with her endorsement, encouraging people to vote. Millions and millions of people liked that post, among them Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, and she was asked about the Instagram activity later at a press conference, and she stopped short of endorsing a candidate, but stood her ground, and this is what she said.
For myself is, I have this amazing platform, so I think the biggest thing would be just encourage people to register to vote. I think for myself, this is the second time I can vote in an election. At age 22, I could vote when I was 18, so I think do that. That's the biggest thing I can do with the platform that I have, and that's the same thing Taylor did. And I think continue to educate yourself with the candidates that we have, the policies that they're supporting. I think that's the biggest thing you can do, and that's what I would recommend to every single person that has that opportunity in our country.
Amanda, so when you first heard about this, what did you think when you saw the story, and what did you think of Caitlin Clark's response from that press conference?
Caitlin Clark is immaculately media trained. Sometimes I think maybe too much. She's had to sort of become a little bit more. I think as the season's gone on, she's become a little bit looser. She's reacted to how people have criticized some of her statements that feel a little bit too neutral. When Taylor Swift posted this, the first thing I did was click on people who had liked it, because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes there are people in your life where you don't know where they stand, so it's always interesting. And so I was actually very struck when I saw that she liked it, and I immediately was like, "This is going to be a thing. This is like much like Taylor Swift. It's like Taylor Swift. This was obviously like a big endorsement of a candidate, but a lot of the ways Taylor Swift communicates her philosophies is in these like little hints, these very small things. So it was like a very Taylor Swift move for Caitlin Clark to just like that post. So when I clocked that, I knew immediately that was going to be a thing, because throughout this WNBA season, you have noticed a lot, and I think we've had this conversation a little bit before, this rivalry, people like to say, between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark has really just been manufactured by a lot of people on the internet who are not really genuine fans of the WNBA, but are fans of like race wars, and are fans
and women
of
like hating each other,
are very sexist, racist, practice misogynoir, and I think they had that. You're seeing some really negative reaction to Caitlin Clark just simply liking that tweet. I think a lot of people have projected their, frankly, kind of like white supremacy onto her, and not that she publicly like denied them, but I think even just with that like, and the fact that she communicated something, even in a subtle way, that she does not agree with white supremacist attitudes, because you probably might not if you agree with Kamala Harris should be president. They lost their entire mind. And I think a lot of these WNBA fans, they really told on themselves. They were never genuine fans. If all it takes for you, because a lot of them were saying, they're going to burn her jersey. They don't want their season tickets to the Fever anymore. If all it took for you was one player liking an Instagram post about a politician for you to never want to watch the WNBA, you were never a genuine fan. Yeah. So I think they're revealing what a lot of people have been saying to be true throughout this season, is that these are people that are just trying to sort of like instigate issues, that are getting in the comments, they benefit, and it helps them promote whatever sort of like toxic, damaging kind of, again, like race war that they want when they pit Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. And just again with one Instagram, like, she was just sort of like, I'm not really down for that. Again, she didn't say that much. She just and in the press conference she just said, I was basically expressing that people should vote, but my takeaway is like, yeah, these people are confirming what people have said this entire season, which is that you are not a genuine fan. Your analysis of Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese in terms of their performance is not based on genuine interest in the sport. If again, all it takes for you to like abandon that is an Instagram post. So I think they're just furious that she seemed like a great vehicle or an outlet for their white supremacy. And she no longer is, and they're just losing their whole mind. And again, really telling on themselves. It's pretty revealing.
Yeah, it was in some ways really funny to read. It wasn't funny, but it was also funny to read the comments that people were leaving on Instagram saying the stuff about, I'm going to burn her jersey. Right. I don't want my tickets anymore.
But Caitlin Clark, it's like they said this about Bud Light. Caitlin Clark is Bud Light. She'll be fine. Like,
no, literally. Like she doesn't need these supporters that are suddenly abandoning her. But also, there's so many people who are like, Caitlin, you shouldn't be getting sucked into politics. Like, this isn't the way to do it. And it's like the only people, she is not sucking herself into politics. She's only like commenting on it because people are basically forcing her to.
Right.
which I find so ironic and funny, and just the exaggeration is so real. And it's like, if she had endorsed Donald Trump, or not even endorsed, excuse me, if she had liked a post that signaled in some way she supported Donald Trump, they'd be rejoicing her. So it's kind of just showing how people are using these athletes as pawns for their, like you were saying, their own little race war, or just whatever that advances what they want them to see. And athletes are not your little puppets. They are people.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I like what you said about Caitlin Clark sort of kind of comparing her liking Taylor Swift's post to something that Taylor Swift would do in a sort of neutral way.
It's almost like, again, I think there are a lot of people that wish she would be a bit more vocal about the way that her success has been weaponized against a lot of Black women in the league. But it was a very Taylor Swift move where she sort of probably knew, or somebody, like, just with this one she sort of subtly hinted, like, I'm not about that. Yeah. Don't use me for that. Yeah. But even though we're going to hold that conversation for next week, we have to touch on one thing for the WNBA today. A'ja Wilson, best player in the league, iconic women's basketball player. She set a WNBA record for points in a season, becoming the first player to surpass 1,000 points in a season.
God.
And again, because reply guys are everywhere, a lot of people were saying, well, like, oh, there are more games this season, so it's not really fair that she crossed it first. No, even if you correct for all of that, she has the most points in a season, the quickest, and she would have passed the old mark anyway. And there were just a lot of really beautiful tributes to her. She was really emotional about it. So congratulations to her. It's such an achievement for such an unbelievable season from her.
Yes, congratulations to A'ja Wilson. That was incredible. For the third week in a row, Playing the Field features a story about a man whose name we have said a lot on this podcast. In the past 3 weeks, he has made an appearance, and I'm talking about Tom Brady. Like I said, I don't think I've ever said this man's name this much in my life. At least this consecutively. But this week's story has actually nothing to do with his time in the booth or his time on the football field, at least in America. Instead, he's worrying about another type of football. Can you tell us, Amanda?
Yeah, this man is everywhere. But in what's been dubbed the, quote, Hollywood Bowl, Tom Brady took home bragging rights over Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds when his team, Birmingham City, defeated Wrexham 3-1 on Monday. You may recognize the name Wrexham from, of course, the hit Hulu docuseries Welcome to Wrexham.
Yes, over the couple of years, Wrexham has climbed the ranks of the English club football all the way to third league. Meanwhile, Brady took part ownership of the team last year, setting the stage for this very high-profile showdown of owners. Brady watched the game from the stands with his friend David Beckham. I'm also just like, how does he have time? Like you said,
private jets.
You can really get a lot done. Yeah. You really can. But I got to watch some of Welcome to Wrexham, and I really learned so much about English soccer, and just, I think it's so fascinating. And they talk about this literally in the first episode, so if you follow soccer, this is going to be very basic to you. But did you know that you basically can promote and demote yourself by league? So it's like the Premier League's up at the top. That's like your Manchester United, Arsenal, blah, blah, blah. And then if you lose, you get demoted. And then you can just be like one of the best teams in, like,
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, in the league, playing teams that are not as good in the league below you because you got demoted and you lost. So it's just really fascinating. Also, if you don't know about this, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney injected a lot of money into this club, and apparently as of this spring, they both are owed about $11.3 million for how much they have, contributed to the team, because they pay so competitively, and they're really trying to recruit people who are going to make a difference on this Welsh soccer team. If I had to pick who I would want to be in the Skybox with, I would, between, David Beckham, Tom Brady, Rob, and Ryan, I'm going to have to go with my boys, Rob and Ryan. Not that anybody asked me, but I'm saying it here now. I'm also Welsh. I always forget that people know where Wales is, so I'm always just like, I'm English. Welsh people who are listening will probably cancel me for that.
Well, I hope you get the opportunity.
Yes, I would love the opportunity. And it was a fun matchup and fun to see those really insanely rich owners.
Just absolutely everywhere.
They love it. Yeah. They love it. It's Tuesday. And so you know what that means. It is time for Tuesday Morning Quarterback, our spin on all of the biggest headlines from the NFL weekend. And we start with a story out of South Florida with Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who left Thursday night's game with a concussion after he collided with Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin. You may remember Hamlin as the man who nearly died on the field 2 seasons ago when he went into cardiac arrest as a result of a collision. The sport is so dangerous.
I mean, if you could paint a picture that the NFL would never want to see, it is Tua's head going into Damar Hamlin's chest. Like, that's the worst case scenario.
Literally.
Like, if I'm high up at the NFL and my therapist is like, what are you so worried about? What's your worst case scenario? Let's talk about it. Let's acknowledge it. I would say Tua's head going into Damar Hamlin's chest. And my therapist would be like, that's never going to happen. It happened. It materialized. And then like you said, this is a dangerous sport. Yeah.
It actually did.
Yeah. What else happened?
Tua's, I mean, he's only been in the NFL for 5 seasons. So his career is extremely short for him. Having experienced as many concussions as he has. It's really sad. He sat many games out in 2022 after he had 2 concussions, but Amanda, the brain can only take so much. And I know this personally from sitting at my computer all day, staring at the screen.
It's basically the same.
It is the same exact thing. This latest concussion has led many to speculate whether or not Tua would retire. It's like a will he, won't he situation. But according to sources, he said he's not considering retiring at this time. And his current goal is to get on the field, quote, when he's ready. What is your reaction to this injury and subsequent report? And I imagine you watched the video.
Yeah. It was super hard to watch. Again, and I keep stressing this, but like to see his head go into Damar Hamlin's chest was, I think, I don't want to call it a heart-stopping moment because it absolutely could have been, but I think everybody watching was, football it's a dangerous sport. But my understanding is that there are ways you can't eliminate the likelihood that you're going to hit your head in such a way that causes a concussion. You absolutely can't. But my understanding is that there are ways to maneuver your body, and there are some best practices that you can act on to maybe make it a small percentage less likely. And our man Tua, we love him. It does not seem like he frequently practices those.
He might not, yeah.
He's an athlete, he's a competitor, and he does what he thinks he needs to do to move his team along in the moment. And that seems to result in serious head injuries more often than for other players. Again, football causes, like playing football, you have a high likelihood of concussions. But, the way our producer phrased it was like, he's not very good at not getting concussions.
Right.
And you start to wonder, when you talk about retirement, of course, in an ideal scenario, he is able to sort of more seriously adopt some of those practices that could protect him, but you're never going to eliminate the possibility entirely. And at this point, it's kind of like, it seems like it'd be too little too late. Like you've already likely going to have some permanent damage. But we talked about this a little bit last week with Claudia. We talked about it with Alex Mori, and I made the case about how she should never have to work again because she's been such a successful female athlete. But because they get paid so little, I'm sure my point was, I'm sure she's rich, but like not like NFL player rich.
Right.
But I think it is like retirement is tough for the men to consider too from a financial point of view, because when you're paid this much money and you have this much money, your lifestyle expands. There's probably people in your life you're taking care of.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you can't just walk away. And not even just the sort of practical concerns, but like these are very dedicated players. Like
they've been playing their whole lives, most of them.
And they are huge celebrities. They're like loved and adored. So it's a super hard choice. Of course, I think he should probably take a step back because it seems like this has happened repeatedly and he's just not able to play in a way where this doesn't happen to him. And at a certain point, you kind of just have to realize that and maybe, prioritize, can I be around for my family long term if I continue to do this, for short term, gratification.
And like I mentioned, his career has been so short lived. Like he probably feels genuinely like I would imagine he must want to just keep going and going and going. Also, like when you're in the middle of playing a sport, you're not thinking about what's best for your body necessarily, So I feel for him. I mean, I was coming through the NFL subreddit. Even the scary men in the NFL subreddit are like, dude, you need to take it back a notch. And I was also reading that the only way for him to even really like retire and have it make sense for him financially is if the doctor is basically, if he is able to retire for medical reasons. And so, I mean, I don't know how those meetings work with the medical team, his medical staff. But if that is on the table, I hope that they're heavily considering the future of this man's life, his health, his well-being, because otherwise he's not going to be able to collect that check of $124 million that is guaranteed to him in his contract.
Yeah, so. I mean, of course I say he should retire. Of course, don't be stupid. But it's like, would I hit my head pretty hard a couple more times for $124 million? I probably would, Blake. I probably would. All right, so our next story and Tuesday Morning Quarterback involves what else? More injuries.
More injuries.
It is the injury edition of Well Played. So 2 big rule changes headline the new season. One was, of course, about kickoffs. Fans had a really strong reaction to that. And the other was to address the so-called hip drop tackle in an effort to reduce injuries. So far, they're not going as planned. Experts say 5 hip drop tackles have resulted in 2 injuries and 0 penalty flags.
Huh, curious.
One of the players injured by a hip drop is Texans running back Joe Mixon, who sustained an ankle injury Sunday night against the Bears. He spoke out about this, saying the NFL and the NFLPA, they made it a rule and an emphasis for a reason. Time to put your money where your mouth is. I think this has just made people wonder why even change the rule if you're not going to enforce it.
Absolutely. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll get injured. But if I know that there's going to be a penalty for it, I want to see that penalty happen. You know what I mean? Like, what's the point? But also, did you notice? I don't know if you saw the list of people who have been, affected by said hip drop tackle, but all of their names start with the letter J. Huh. And this is a problem for me specifically because on my fantasy team, I've got Joe Burrow, my quarterback. I cannot have this man getting hip drop tackled. So...
Okay, so officials, for the sake of Blake's fantasy team, please start enforcing this rule. And we'll get to this in our next story for Tuesday Morning Quarterback. But the NFL gets a good amount of the kind of bad reputation and bad PR the NFL gets is because the sport is so dangerous and can have a catastrophic impact on athletes' long-term health and wellness. So you would think if they have an opportunity to mitigate that, they would be all over it. So I find it a little unusual and disappointing that they're not.
This one is specifically about preventing them, though. Since 2022, the NFL has let players wear Guardian caps over their helmets in training camp. There are these caps that go over the helmet. I don't know if you've seen a picture of them, and it's with an intention to reduce head injuries. And this year they began allowing players to wear them in actual games. And in the first week of the season, only 5 players opted to try them out and take them for a little test drive. In week 2, a 6th player joined them.
So Cleveland Browns linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah said, quote, "Week 1, I kind of had like one hit that I kind of felt a little bit. So I'm like, man, let me try this Guardian cap and see what it's all about. It felt good, though. It was nice. It was smooth. I really didn't feel anything really on the hits. I'm very glad we had the opportunity to wear those things."
I really like your rendition of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, just saying.
Just was keeping it faithful to all of his filler words. Why do you think other players are hesitant to try this out? Are they just afraid to look silly? Is it a toughness thing? Do you think it's a comfort thing? Why are we only seeing a very small handful of players in this league wear the cap?
I can only guess it has to do with the level of dorkiness. But at the same time, it's not like riding a bike where when you're riding a bike, it's a solo activity for the most part. So everybody is just watching you on that bike with a helmet on. And, sometimes people, I'm not one of those people. I will wear a helmet, but sometimes people feel dorky about it. And that's why they don't wear helmets. I criticize all my friends who do not. And you listener, I'm not going to criticize you. Do what you want. But it's different with football, though, because everybody's wearing a helmet. And the game is going so fast, I would imagine, you're not even clocking that somebody might be wearing a Guardian cap. That's my initial thought.
The Guardian caps look silly until you just put another piece of fabric over them.
Yeah.
But also, football players, I hate to break it to you, you already look silly.
Yes.
We've become accustomed to seeing these like big bulky tops. A lot of them have like skinny legs. They look ridiculous already. Like we're just used to it.
What is
You can become used to anything.
It's true.
Fencers look silly. Like all athletes at some point, basketball players, when they have nose injuries, they have that thing on their face. They look silly. Like sometimes you look
just embrace it.
You look silly. To me, it's just like kind of like you said, it's just appalling. Like if it's on the table, there's really mixed sort of studies about how much this can help. I've read that there's a negligible impact on concussion incidents. I've read it can reduce them by up to 50%. If it's even near 50%, if that's even on the table, I don't understand why the NFL isn't just making them. Again, this is one of their top 5 PR problems is that people really hurt their head for the rest of their lives, and it can ruin these players' lives. If you have an opportunity to mitigate that even a little bit, it's crazy to me not to make it mandatory. Just make them all like just manufacture the caps for them. They do look a little silly until you cover them again. They're kind of like a weird kind of grid. Yeah, you look like a dinosaur. But still, like I said, Yeah. Do I look silly as hell with my bicycle helmet? Yeah, but I like living. I like being
This is something I like doing.
I like being able to walk. So it is so confusing to me why such a small number, but I'm sure if you just said you have to, I really don't think people would would put up much of a fight. Like, especially what we saw with Tua over the weekend. I think people should be setting more of an example, and especially for like, there's a big conversation about should kids be playing football. Set a positive example for those kids that like it is cool to really protect your head. I think it's a huge missed opportunity.
And like skating too. Not that we cover skateboarding on the show, but I feel like that is a huge sport that so many kids get involved in. And it's really up to the big guys, even the teenagers, to wear the helmets. You don't even know how many Bushwick skate parks I walk by and these doofuses aren't wearing their helmets. I see you.
Nothing makes me more furious in New York than seeing a kid on a bicycle without a helmet. If my child if I ever catch them without a helmet on with a bicycle, that's the worst.
Your child is listening to you through the womb right now.
Yeah, he's hearing this message. Smoke a joint. You can have a cocktail in high school. You don't wear a helmet. It's
You're
over
done.
For you.
You're toast, kid.
Yeah. Okay, Blake, we have come to the end of Tuesday Morning Quarterback. We're hanging up our helmet caps for the day. Finally, we have a benching alert, a huge one. Last year's number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young, he's been demoted from his starting quarterback position for the Carolina Panthers. This is following a disappointing rookie season. Young began this season with 0 touchdowns and just 245 passing yards, good for 32nd in the league. So his team generated only 3 points in a loss to the Chargers this past Sunday.
Yeah, Young will be replaced by 36-year-old veteran Andy Dalton. And according to reports, Young was, quote, very shocked by the benching. I would too if I was the overall number 1 pick and was being replaced. I'm going to stop myself there because I was going to make an ageist comment. I was going to say if I was going to get replaced by a man who was that much older than me.
No, I don't think it's ageist. I think it's a very practical thing to point out.
Okay, I didn't want to hash out old beef that we've had, Amanda. I didn't want to do this on this show.
Youth is important in athletic events. It's fine. I'll concede that.
Okay, thank you. But Amanda, if you were ranked 32nd in passing in a 32-team league, how prepared would you be for that bad news?
I would pretty much anticipate it. I do wonder if he's like quiet quitting.
Already?
Like, you talk your way into like a really great cushy job and then you get in and you're just sort of like,
I feel like
I'm good. I'm watching people's hearts stop, getting hit in the head, getting hip drop tackled and ruining their entire sides of their body.
I'm good. I'm good off that.
I'm good. I'll be 32nd. No, but I'm sure this is very disappointing for him. And it's certainly surprising for fans and watchers.
I get it though. I mean, the expectations are extremely hard and there's a lot of pressure on these people, especially for the number 1 picks. Excuse me. I did watch Hard Knocks. I've watched 2 seasons now. I've watched the Giants season and I've watched the Bears season. And the number 1 pick this year, Caleb Williams for the Bears. I mean, he's having a difficult little season too. But we're only 2 weeks in, so I'm trying to give him some grace. And hopefully, I know that Bryce Young has been playing for over a year now, or over a season, I should say, and has this extra season on him. But I'm just hoping that Caleb Williams maybe doesn't have the same fate, and we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see
there's
how
an
that shakes
adjustment
out.
period, and not everybody adjusts. But in a lot of ways, as we've discussed, a lot of like really interesting, surprising narratives at the start. We're just a couple weeks into this NFL season, and there's been tons to talk about.
Okay, Amanda, we have our guest coming in just a moment, but we're going to leave this little pretty studio here, and we're going to head to our audio studio back at Skim HQ. And when we get back, we will be joined by our fantasy expert, Matthew Berry. Are you excited?
I can't wait. We need him.
We need him so bad. It's time to introduce our guest. You probably all know him as one of the most respected and recognized voices in the fantasy football world, and we know him as the man behind FantasyLife.com, one of the stars of Football Night in America on NBC and Peacock, and he's a friend of the Skim. Please welcome Matthew Berry. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Blake. Hi, Amanda.
Hey.
How's it going? I was thinking before we talked to you, like, I cannot imagine your text inbox this time of year. It must be out of control. With friends
My phone
and family
blows up
asking for friends and family help.
Oh, it's friends, it's family, it's celebrities, it's coworkers, it's randos, it's people I haven't heard from. Like, hey man, we were in 4th grade geometry together. So at my flex position, yeah, it's everyone. My phone blows up 24/7. My wife just looks at it and is like, she's gotten used to it.
You should set up. I would send them like, sure, for a fee of $20 a minute. I'm happy to help. Do you ever get players text you like, hey man, come on, that wasn't cool?
Rarely, very rarely. Every once in a while, maybe I'll get a DM. But players don't really, they sort of try to, ignore that.
We just did our first fantasy football draft with 24 people in 2 leagues, including a lot of new participants, myself, Amanda included. It might be too late for us given the draft has already passed, but what advice do you usually give brand new fantasy football players?
Well, I think, some basic advice is just sort of understand the rules, right? You don't have to get knee deep into it, but just like, are you playing one quarterback or two? How many wide receivers are you doing? How many teams make the playoffs? What are your rules for replacing injured players? Like, do you have an IR spot, or are you going to have to, use a bench spot if somebody gets injured? My advice is to do mock drafts, practice at least once or twice, to sort of see what the experience is. And if you don't know anything about fantasy football and you're like, you don't know about NFL and you're like, I got invited to this league and I want to play, but I don't really know anything about fantasy football. I've never played before. I don't really even follow the NFL. I don't want to look like the dumb person in the league. Pick somebody's rankings. Blake, you're pointing to yourself, so I assume that you had that feeling. I would have said, just take my rankings. And when it's your time, and print out the rankings, and as players get picked, scratch them off. And that as you go down, whether it's my rankings or somebody else's rankings, somebody you trust, but like just when it's your turn to pick, take the player that's the highest person on the list that, that's still available. And I'm not saying you're going to win the championship, but you won't embarrass yourself.
That's all I want. That's really all I want.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I did. And as we were doing our draft, I got some like reassuring, affirming looks like, oh, good pick. And I was like, thank you to my list. Yeah.
But
so you've been
there you go. I'll just say this. I write an article every year, and you can Google this, called the Draft Day Manifesto, the 7 habits of highly effective drafters. And so, stealing the famous title, but it's a kind of a basic blueprint, Amanda and Blake, that just sort of kind of lays out step by step, like okay, so you're playing for the first time. Here's what you need to do this year.
Yeah, I know that has been a really helpful resource for a lot of people on our team. You've also been covering and writing about fantasy football for 25 years. We're so curious, what's changed the most since you first started? Is there any, conventional wisdom from years past that's just totally flipped on its head recently or over
What's
time?
changed the most? I mean, a lot. My hairline, for one, to be perfectly honest. I've been doing this a long time, ladies. Yeah. I used to have a big, full, bushy head of hair. Now, not so much. What has changed? I think the biggest thing that's changed over the 25 years, I'll answer this 3 ways. Number one is that I think just sort of what's changed is technology. 25 years ago, you couldn't play it on, in some cases, you couldn't play it on a computer, let alone a phone, right? And now there's so many apps and like the scoring is updated. And it's just, it's so slick, right? So technology has helped a tremendous amount in terms of getting alerts about players, getting news, everything like that. Also, the coverage is so much more significant than it was 25 years ago. 25 years ago, it was, 25 years ago is what? It's I guess is 25 years ago is the year 2000, I guess, basically, right? I started writing in 1999. I've been playing it for a long time. So, it was online at that point. So it was on the internet, but, there wasn't, cell phones weren't, as prominent, and there certainly weren't smartphones where you would have apps and that kind of thing. So technology has been improvement, also just information. Like 25 years ago, guys like me didn't exist, right? You wouldn't get alerts. Twitter didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. And so finding out information about the NFL and about fantasy football was harder than it was today, where now, every single snap at practice, you go on social media and you're seeing clips of players doing things at training camp. Like those things are more prevalent. Players themselves are on training camp. Like, yeah, I ain't playing this week or what, it's just a lot more. And it's both a good and bad thing, because now there's such a prevalence of news and information out there. You have to sort of sift through the weeds to figure out what you can believe, what you can't. Mm-hmm. And the last thing that's changed, I think, honestly, is the acceptance of it into mainstream society. I know that sounds weird, but like I always talk about like sort of my career. When I started out, in 1999 writing for, at the time, a low trafficked internet website called RotoWorld. Over the 25 years, by the way, RotoWorld ended up getting bought by NBC, and now I'm back again. right? But when I started out in 1999, I would go to a party and be like, what do you do for a living? I'm like,
Right.
well, there's this game called, have you ever heard of fantasy football? Oh, yeah, I have a cousin that I think does it, right? And then it became like, what do you do for a living? And it's like, well, it's fantasy football. Like, oh my God, I love it, And then it became, I'd walk in and be like, it's just like, hey, they recognize me, and hey, Matthew, I got a question to flex, like, so it just sort of like that progress of the idea that I would be on a podcast talking fantasy football hosted by two women that work for a daily newsletter that reaches millennial women, is was unheard of 25 years ago, honestly, even 5 years ago. I'll tell you a quick story that I think you guys will appreciate, which is when my wife and I were dating, my now wife and I, we were dating. We'd been dating like 7 or 8 months. And she calls me up one day and she says, she goes, hey, I need to talk to you, and I'm like, yeah, what's up? And she goes, well, she goes, things are going well between us, right? I'm like, yeah, I think we're having a great time. And she goes, yeah, I am too. I go, but honestly, I'm really starting to fall for you. And I said, yeah, no, it's really, our relationship's progressing nicely. And she goes, but I got to be honest with you. I don't know if I can be in a serious relationship with someone who's on TV. I don't know, if I could handle that. And I said, well, I said, I totally hear you. I said, look, on one level, at the end of the day, you either trust me or you don't. But I said, it's a serious issue. And I said, I want to give it the time that it deserves. And we should talk about all your anxiety and let's talk about our relationship. And, but I have to run right now to work. I don't have time to have a serious conversation, but I'll tell you what, I'm doing an event on Saturday. Why don't you come to the event? And I'll block out the rest of the afternoon after the event, and we'll spend as much time talking about this subject as you want. And she's like, okay, that sounds great. So she comes to the event, and it's like all the events that I ever do. And it's, it's fathers and sons. It's fat guys in football jerseys. It's 99% men. My wife looks around, my then girlfriend, she looks around, takes one look at my audience, says, you know what, I'm fine. Never mind. Knock yourself out. I'm good. I love your audience. I'm fine. I'm not worried about it at all. We don't even have to have the conversation. And so, we've been together now for over 16 years. So it's worked out. But my point is that, it's like my audience for the longest time was primarily men, and it still is. The majority is men. But the fact is that more and more women are playing fantasy football, that understand it, that it's no longer this weird nerd thing that just a slight portion of America does. It's like, it's a massive thing that almost 60 million people play.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of women who participate in fantasy, as I mentioned, myself included, I'm a little worried going into this week. I'm not going to lie, because a couple of my guys, my roster, falling to injuries. And I'm sure, as you obviously have seen this weekend, we saw a ton of high-profile players who fell to injury, including Deebo Samuel, Tua Tagovailoa, Isaiah Pacheco. This goes on. So what is your strategy for someone like me for navigating the waiver wire when a top player is going down? And who do you have on your eye? Who do you have your eye on this week to replace?
Well, okay, so it's a great question. I mean, there's tons of players, right? So you mentioned Tua, also Jordan Love at the quarterback position, at the running back position. You mentioned Pacheco, but Joe Mixon got a little bit banged up. Also among wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, all going to miss time as well. That doesn't even include like Puka Nacua from week number 1. Evan Ingram missed last week as well. So that, just a lot of injuries that you're navigating for. And so I guess, my advice would be is, well, listen to Fantasy Football Happy Hour, which is my podcast, where we went through this exact subject for an hour today. We air 3 p.m. Eastern on Peacock every single day. It's available wherever you get podcasts. It's also available at all times on the NFL and NBC YouTube channel. It's on demand on Peacock. Airs at 3 o'clock on Channel 85 on SiriusXM as well. We're everywhere. So, but if you don't have time, you can also go to fantasylife.com, where we have an article that says, here's who we would rank. Blake, specific to you, what I would say is that you have to hit, it's all team dependent. And the question is what I would say to you is like, okay, which players on your team are hurt? So like who on your team specifically is hurt? And then who else do you have to replace them?
Well,
And go ahead.
I was just gonna. I mean, I will not even pull out names because I'm serious. I looked at my roster, 4 red marks, O's, and so I don't want to embarrass myself too much. But continue with your advice, Matthew.
Well, by the way, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, Blake. I mean, no one can predict injuries. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, like you hit some bad luck. That's part of fantasy football. What I would say is that you want to do twofold, right? You want to. There's a couple of different things that you want to do. Number one is you're going to try to pick up players, obviously, to replace, right? So let's say you lost Isaiah Pacheco, you mentioned. Well, can you pick up Samaje Perine, who's likely going to be the lead running back in Kansas City? It's him and a guy named Carson Steele, can be a little bit more of a running back by committee, but still, like, there's somebody out there that potentially you could get some production out of, like, or at wide receiver, Demarcus Robinson is a guy that's interesting in LA who, he played 92% of the snaps on Sunday. So that's one of is you're trying to pick that up. But if you're like, oh, those people get gone, or like, I can't get them, then one of the other things you want to do is you want to try to make a trade. And so, again, without having looked at your team, like, do you have, if, for example, making this up, but let's say you have healthy running backs, but all your wide receivers, you had Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel and AJ Brown. You're like, I got no wide receivers. I'm like, okay, but you have like 3 good running backs. And you're like, yeah, I actually got lucky there. Okay, well then let's trade one of those running backs for a healthy wide receiver. Let's look at your depth. And if you say to me, well, I got no depth. Okay, well then let's create some depth. And like I just said, so for example, there's one area where it's really easy to create depth is quarterback, right? So like Derek Carr is off to a really hot start. He's had over 20 fantasy points in each game. Let's see, Geno Smith, he's available in almost 70% of leagues. And Geno Smith is basically like a borderline top 12 quarterback at the moment. So could you pick up one of those guys? And then let's say you have a star quarterback and you say, hey, you know what? I can live with Derek Carr or Geno Smith through the rest of the season. So, hey, would you like to trade? I have Patrick Mahomes. Will you give me somebody good for Patrick Mahomes? Because I've now picked up. Does that make sense? So like you're trying to create depth because you've got to have some assets to trade.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing is that, and I know a lot of people after the weekend, they're like, well, I'm done, I'm toast. But it sounds like you said, you just laid out 3 options that pretty much most people will be able to pursue at least one of those options.
Yeah, Amanda, I was in a league last year where a guy was 1-4 and made the playoffs. Again, it's a weekly game. Things change, after week 1 and you had Cooper Kupp and you're like, my team's the best team in the league. He got 21 targets. I'm crushing everyone. And now this week you're like, oh God, it's all in shambles. Like
totally. Things
change very quickly in fantasy football. And even though your team may not look great right now, a week from now it might. So again, that's what you want to do is you want to try to, and you would roster people, try to pick up some backup running backs. And again, we're never rooting for injury, but injuries do happen. It's a violent game. And so if you have a running back on a team where the player ahead of them gets hurt, suddenly now you have you have value in that player. And so I think it's just about, it's way too early to give up. A lot of football left to play.
Absolutely. One more question as we kind of look ahead to this week. How do you approach questions of who to start and bench when it's kind of a close call? And second part of that question, how much do you focus on matchups, especially when it comes to playing against a strong or a weak defense?
Matchups are really important. I play a lot into it. In a tiebreaker, I'll go with a matchup. I'll also look at talent sometimes, or, talent or offensive scheme. Like if you've got one, I think, if one guy is on a bad offense, and one guy's on a good offense, give me the guy in the good offense. Give me the guy with a better quarterback. Give me the guy that's in a game environment that we expect. You can look at whether you bet on football or not. The people that set the lines for sports betting. I have a deal with DraftKings, for example. I'm a brand ambassador for DraftKings. And so like DraftKings, like very quickly will say like, hey, this is a game that's got an over-under of 53, which is a high number. Or this is a game that has an over-under of like 38, which is a low number. And so you're like, you know what? I'm going to take the guy in the game that's projected to score a lot more points than the guy that's playing in the game that is projected to be a low-scoring game. Because if it doesn't always work out this way, but the guys at DraftKings, the team, men and women, very, very smart. And they're using all sorts of analytics to come up with these lines to make it pretty close. That's how they stay in business, right? Because if they were losing all their bets, then DraftKings would go into business. So it's a good barometer of sort of what we expect the game environment to be like, and so those are games you can target. Generally speaking, we like at Fantasy Life. I'm too busy to do this, but I've got one of my guys does projections, and we project every single player for every single game every single week. And he's really, really good. He's our director of analytics. He's the nerdiest guy you'll ever meet. But that's what you want. God bless him. Yeah. Is you want a guy that's like a crazy number cruncher, and so again, you can sort of use those projections to make start sit decisions for your team in terms of, well, this guy's projected for 100 yards and this guy's projected for 85. I'm going to go for the 100-yard guys. Again, we're trying to predict the future. It doesn't always work out, but all you can do in fantasy football is play the odds and put yourself in the best position to win. The example I like to give is blackjack, right? You're sitting on 18 and the dealer's showing 6. Well, you stay. You stay because the odds is that the dealer is going to pull a 10 and then pull another 10 and bust, and you're going to win. Now, doesn't mean that always happens. The dealer could pull another 6, right? And then a 9 and you're done, right? Or, and there's a chance that you could say, hit me and pull a 3, but the odds of that are low. And again, so all you want to do is you're playing the odds. You're just trying to put yourself in the best position to win. What's most likely to happen? It's not always going to happen, but if you play the odds like that, generally speaking, more often than not, it's going to work out similar to a blackjack table where if you sort of play the right way and you play what's more likely to happen than not, over the long run, it'll work out.
Wow. I don't know about you, Amanda, but I personally am feeling very motivated to get my roster in check tonight after I clock out. But before you go, Matthew, sorry, are you excited? Getting excited? Anyway, before you go, Matthew, we do want to play a quick game with you. I think you're going to have fun with it. It's called the Skim Skybox Draft. With people like Taylor Swift boosting attention and eyeballs on the NFL, we want to do our own draft of celebrities we'd select to turn the most heads in a game. So there's going to be 3 rounds, 3 celebrities each. Here's how it works. We each get to draft 1 musician, 1 athlete or former athlete from another sport, and 1 general celebrity, actor, or otherwise. And your goal is to assemble the best trio for your Skybox to get the most media coverage and the most cutaways from the game. You got it?
I do.
Blake, why don't you go first so Matthew has some time to consider his options? Then Matthew, you'll pick right after Blake, and I will pick third. We'll go musician, athlete, and then celebrity.
Okay.
At the end, we'll compare our teams, and maybe we'll even invite our audience after this to choose whose team they think would turn the most heads. So, Blake, are you ready? Which musician are you drafting to your Skybox?
I'm going to go a little uncommon here, and I will say Billie Eilish. Do I have to be giving any justifications for my answer?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Billie Eilish, unconventional. I think that she would match up. You'll see, she'll fit into my lineup, and you'll see why later. That's all I'm going to say. She appeals to a wide audience.
Okay.
Matthew.
Allow me just to say, Blake, you seem lovely. This is our first time meeting. That's a terrible pick. That's a terrible, terrible pick.
All right.
That might be the worst pick I've ever seen. We haven't even done the rest of this draft yet, and I'm already telling you right now that's the worst pick of this draft.
All right. What do you got, Matthew?
Well, I unless she's not eligible, Taylor Swift. She's a musician. I mean, who's more famous?
Like she's not allowed.
Who gets?
We didn't say that though.
You're right.
We didn't say that.
If we're saying Taylor Swift is off the table because she's sort of inspired the game, then okay. But you didn't say that. Again, we've talked about this earlier in terms of your, what you should do. Study the rules. And I didn't see a rule that said, no, we can't play Taylor Swift. So again, she's a musician, a very talented one, by the way. I mean, there's no one more famous on the planet right now than Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I do think I have both of you beat. And while there is some speculation, deep speculation that this person is dead, some people think he's alive. So I'm sending Tupac to my Skybox. I think that Tupac's mere presence anywhere would probably get the most eyes.
Oh my God.
Questionably dead. Maybe he's around. I'm picking Tupac. Because again, we didn't clarify the rules. We didn't say somebody who is 100% alive.
Okay.
It's now a conspiracy theorist podcast.
I already know that Matthew's going to drag me for my complete lineup, but I'm just going to have to go with it anyway. So I'm going to go with somebody who we know potentially now as an actor, but people who are maybe a bit older than me know as an athlete. Terry Crews. Because why the hell would Billie Eilish and Terry Crews be in a Skybox at the same time?
I see.
Why? I feel like they would have a great time together. And he's a very likable man. And he would maybe, I'm not going to say what kind of moves he'd be pulling, but sorry, that sounded inappropriate. I mean, I just have seen him in those Old Spice commercials, and that is what I meant. He has done that chest jiggle. I feel like maybe he'd pull one out for the cameras. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand the concept. That's not my issue. Okay.
All right, Matthew.
Okay,
show
so
me what you got.
which one? So we did musician. Which one is this? This is.
Now you're going
This
to choose
is
an
the
athlete or a
athlete.
former retired athlete.
Okay.
Anyone who's ever been an athlete.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
I don't understand why you guys are just letting me run away with this. Like, why you're just like. But I will go. If you're talking about former athlete, talk about an athlete. Like again, Terry Crews was a former athlete. Now he's sort of an actor. I'll keep in that same vein, but I'll pick somebody. I'll pick somebody that people actually care about, and that's The Rock. The Rock, who played college football at the University of Miami, but obviously now an actor as well. He's a former pro wrestler as well, of course. So very much a former athlete, but he's The Rock, and he may not be as famous as Taylor Swift, but he's pretty damn close, and
Also an odd matchup that people would not be expecting. So I'll give you that.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Can you smell what The Rock is cooking? I'll tell you what he's cooking. He's cooking first place for me. I'm crushing you guys like a grape in this draft. This is embarrassing.
All right, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm going purely for scale here, and I'm picking Ronaldo. He is
Okay.
the most famous Cristiano Ronaldo, the most famous athlete in the world. All of hundreds of millions
A
of
gorgeous
followers
man
across
at that,
platforms.
too.
I think if we're talking pure scale and impressions, that's what I'm going for.
Yep.
You might have taken
That's
us with
fair.
that one. Oh my God.
All right,
That's a
Blake,
good
you gotta
pick.
round out
Okay,
your team.
I'm just gonna full send it. I know I'm in third place, but I would love to see Miss Liza Minnelli in that Skybox. I feel like people would, again, it would just add to the mystique of what the actual hell is going on. I also think she appeals to older audiences. She appeals to the LGBTQ community. She appeals to people who watched Arrested Development, excellent television. That's it. That's all I have to say. Matthew, floor is yours.
And
What
this can be an
category is
actor or
this?
any celebrity.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to say what category. It is celebrity. It could be an actor or otherwise.
Just not musician. You've been confident so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. In terms of celebrity, all right. So I've got The Rock, and I've got Taylor Swift.
What hole are you trying to fill here?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what hole I'm trying to fill. I've got a couple of choices here, but I'll go with Jay-Z. I'll go with can I mean, I don't know if you tell me if I can do this or not, but I was going to say Jay-Z. I'll just say Jay-Z, and then because chances are,
If he brings a guest,
Oh.
lucky surprise. Yeah.
well, that's what I'm saying. Jay-Z is probably going to bring his wife. And so I kind of get a bonus there, because I've seen it. I've seen Jay-Z and Beyonce courtside at Knicks games and everything like that. They often will go to they were at the suite they were in a suite together at the Super Bowl as well. So I'm gonna go Jay-Z.
That's a beautiful lineup. And I'm going to round mine up to join Tupac and Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm bringing in Oprah. I'm bringing in
Oh
Oprah.
my God.
And I think she can, again, scale. She can get eyes on her own, but I think that trio would obviously blow some minds for many reasons. But I think these are all, we clowned Blake a bit, but I think these are all strong takes. And they would definitely
Stop it.
absolutely light up
Blake's
our
team is
Instagram
terrible.
feeds.
I understand that Blake is your friend and you have to work with her. But I'm just going to tell you objectively, it's a terrible team.
Billie Eilish was a choice. Blake is decades older than both of us. I think she needs a little bit more.
Decades older, yes.
Or younger,
No.
excuse me.
No
We're
one's
decades
older. Look
than
at
her.
me. No one's older than me. But what I will
You
tell
said
you
it.
is, what I'm going to tell you girls about is that no one. Think about, again, I know something about this because I work for NBC Sports. My day job is I'm on Football Night in America, which is the pregame show to Sunday Night Football. It is the highest rated show on television, except for the only thing on TV, literally higher rated than Football Night in America, which is the pregame to Sunday Night Football, is the actual Sunday Night Football game, which is in prime time on NBC Sports every single Sunday night. So, and I know because I hear these meetings, like I'm sometimes in these conversations. And so we know ahead of time, like our opening game Thursday night was Ravens at the Chiefs, and we knew that Taylor Swift was going to be there. We knew what box she was going to be in. And so I don't know that it was decided like we're going to cut away 6 times or 3 times or 5, but I know that we are aware when there is a big name celebrity that is going to be there, and specifically a Chiefs game, Taylor Swift, right?
Yes.
And so I just think, and so what they look at is like, okay, is this interesting to our general population? Is this interesting to the football going team, to the people that are watching this game? And so, yet I got news for you. The people that like Billie Eilish are not the core football watching audience.
Not
or
yet,
even
Matthew.
sports watching.
Not yet.
Or even sports watching audience.
Right.
Like,
You're going to watch this. You're going to listen back to this podcast in 10 years. Something's going to happen.
we're not drafting for 10 years from now. If we're drafting from 10 years from now, give me Josh Richards on TikTok. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here, right?
Yes,
Give me
practical.
Mr. Beast.
Mhm.
Like, but like, you know what I mean? Like, we're like,
Work with the audience.
No
you have,
one-
not the one you
there-
want. Yep.
Billie Eilish appeals to younger non-sports fans would be my argument.
Yeah.
Right? And like I would argue that people over the age of 35, certainly 40, don't care about Billie Eilish.
No, my father certainly does not.
And I would say that the people that care about Terry Crews or whoever you said, they're probably already watching. I think
No,
they're watching.
the people who are watching don't know who the hell Terry Crews is.
Oh, they know.
Stop
if they saw him, they would.
Yeah, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's the Old Spice guy. Oh, that's the guy that can move his nipples. Like, they're like, whatever, but like, they're not, no one's like, oh my God, whoa, Terry Crews is at the game.
Right.
If they just be like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy.
It's just
No.
the trio, my
You're not.
trio together.
You're not.
Yes.
You're not. Let me put it this way: if Terry Crews and Billie Eilish, I would argue for this, they can walk down the street just fine. I'm not saying they don't get recognized. I'm not saying they don't get stopped. Hey, can I take a picture? Can I get
Billie
an autograph?
Eilish, hard disagree. But
What?
Yeah, in Bed-Stuy. Like,
no, in Manhattan, the stands are crazy. The stands are insane.
I get it, but I'm just saying, but it's not Taylor Swift can't walk around. Taylor Swift can't go to a supermarket without 10 security guys around her. Same with The Rock, same with Jay-Z, same with Ronaldo. Like, but Billie Eilish can go shopping at a grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, that would be my argument.
But that's okay.
yeah,
That's
we
okay.
give you points for novelty, but
Terry
yeah.
Crews can definitely go shopping at a grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not facing that.
And by the way, I don't think there's a person by the way, so we're arguing that no one over 40 cares about Billie Eilish in a significant way. I'm not saying there aren't over 40 fans, but I'm just saying her fan base,
I would never
her fan base is younger. Fair? That's fair.
That's
Yes.
fair, Matthew.
Liza Minnelli's fan base, those that are still alive, are,
You'd be surprised, but also yes, you're right. Not in the football loving, sports loving.
but yes, I know she is huge in the LGBTQ community, right? But that's not that's not the core football watching audience. Again, I'm not trying to generalize here. There are obviously people in that community that love and watch and enjoy football, but that's not the majority of the people. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just telling you, if I'm a director of Football Night in America or Sunday Night Football or the World Cup, oh, make sure we get a shot of Liza Minnelli in the box. Like, what are we doing?
She'd be so confused.
Blake,
It'd be
Blake,
great.
You had a very idealistic
Yes.
fan acquisition strategy, which I think we can agree maybe was not the strongest.
Perhaps
but again,
not.
your idealism, we are very appreciative. So this,
Yeah, and what I will say, Blake, you can now judge this. We've all agreed here. I think even you. We've agreed that you're third, and it's a distant third. It's a rebuilding year for you. You've already many people get out of the draft and immediately have to start rebuilding, but it's you. That's where you're at. But
I'm just gonna be a comeback kid.
Sure. In 2025 when I do this podcast next year. But Amanda, so Blake, but you can do the tie between me and Amanda. And here's my argument about Amanda's team. Ronaldo's a great pick. I got no issue with Ronaldo. And who was I know you have Tupac. We'll get to that in a second.
Oprah
but
was my final pick.
Oprah. Yeah, Oprah's tough to beat too.
Yeah, she is tough to beat.
Oprah is famous and beloved. I think I win though. I think I win on Tupac. I think that's where, because I mean, again, I got Taylor Swift, I got The Rock, and I got Jay-Z. You got Ronaldo and Oprah,
Swift and Jay-Z.
2 home runs. But honestly, I think I won the draft when Blake passed on Taylor Swift. But
in my head, she wasn't even included. But you're my guest, so I concede.
No, he's right. We didn't. If we don't say it's not allowed,
You're right.
It's allowed.
But
you're
anyway.
Right.
I mean, they're letting people do hip drops, and those aren't allowed. So you can do whatever you want.
It's a good point, Amanda. It's a very good point. But the last thing I'll say here is that I don't think that if Tupac's there, whether it's a hologram or he's back from the dead, if I'm the director of the World Cup or the Super Bowl or whatever, hey man, I think Tupac's in that suite. Isn't he dead? I don't know. That might be him. Do we want to open up that can of worms? No, it's a hologram. No, we're not doing that. I'm not messing with maybe he's Tupac, maybe he's not, because what am I fonting it as?
You're fact checking. Yeah.
You're not like, am I going to go out there and say this guy is definitely Tupac?
Right.
Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to Chiron Tupac with a question mark? I'm avoiding that. It's the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
It's too much is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. Give me another shot of Taylor Swift in that suite with The Rock and Jay-Z.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're going to say.
I gotta say, I love how much you humored our game. I was not expecting such, dragging to be happening to my team, but I appreciate your perspective nonetheless.
Listen, feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift. So that concludes.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is what I do for a living. I analyze drafts.
Right, exactly. And you did it beautifully. I mean, if you enjoyed this and you're watching us on YouTube, tell us who did draft the best Skybox. And Matthew, this was such a treat. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us again where our listeners can read more of your stuff, hear and see more of your fantasy advice. Where can they get more?
Well, NBCsports.com, rotoworld.com. I do Fantasy Football Happy Hour. It's an hour-long podcast every single day, available wherever you get podcasts. It's also on the NFL on NBC YouTube channel and on demand on Peacock. That's Monday through Friday. Sunday mornings, I do a pregame show for 2 hours, 11 a.m. to 1 o'clock Eastern, all the way up to kickoff, where we answer a bunch of questions and we go through all the latest injuries. That's also on Peacock and the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Football Night in America before the Sunday Night Football game. You can see me there every week on NBC Sports. I also own a website called fantasylife.com. And we have a ton of free information, videos, podcasts, rankings that will help you win your team. There's also a premium subscription as well called Fantasy Life Plus if you want to get an extra edge. If you've done something like Blake here and you've just drafted a terrible team and you're like, what can I do? How do I get rid of Billie Eilish and Terry Crews and upgrade my team? Then we've got the tools for you that make it super easy and simple at fantasylife.com.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That is it for this episode of Well Played. Thank you again to our guest, Matthew Berry.
Yes, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to rate, review, and even follow the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. Follow us on Instagram @TheSkim, and be sure to check out our new Well Played YouTube channel, where we have full-length video of today's episode. And we're looking forward to being back next week. This was so much fun. Thank you for the warm welcome back and for not canceling me for my what I thought were ageist comments. So yeah, thanks everyone to listening to Well Played.
The only podcast in a league of its own.